Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Arise with Sally Goodwin. Lovely to see you on this Wednesday morning. Very windy here in Cape Town, but otherwise a beautiful morning. And we are halfway through this week, halfway closer to the weekend, getting to the place where we all want to be. And so Stuart, who you all know is my incredible cameraman, was here the other day to see the best place to record for my live CBN recordings. And so he gave me some advice on where the best place to record for my Facebook lives. And so I'm trying out what he suggested. I'm trying out a new position to record my Facebook lives. Good morning, Candace. I'm going to move you a little bit closer because I can't see. I can't see you. I can't read, put it this way. So it's lovely to see you. So welcome everybody. Welcome to Arise with Sally Goodwin. Welcome to this windy, wonderful Cape Town morning. Good morning, Renee. Lovely to see you. I have been given, good morning, Renilwe. Lovely to see you. I have glasses now. I'll show you. I don't want to wear them while I record though, because I think the reflection, sometimes when you wear glasses and you record like this, then you reflect. But I'll show you anyway. So these are glasses for everyday wear. So these are actually, I'm supposed to wear all day, every day. You can see the reflection of the light, so they won't work for recording. And these are reading glasses. Can you believe it? Huh? I have to have one of each now. But I might pop the reading glasses on if I read from the Bible, but otherwise I won't wear them because they're too reflective. But so for those of you who've just joined, it's lovely to see all of you. Good morning, beautiful Bertha. Lovely to see you. Good morning, Jolene. Lovely to have you on, my friend. Just so amazing to have you all on this very windy Cape Town morning. And so just for those of you who've just joined, I was just telling everybody else a moment ago. Good morning, Jen. Lovely to see you. I was telling everybody else a moment ago that good morning, Stu. You see, so Stuart is my incredible cameraman, and he records my shows for Live CBN. And so he came to our new home the other day to figure out where he could record for Live CBN. And while he was here, he gave me some ideas about recording for my Facebook Live and the best place to sit. So I have changed my position according to his advice, and I'm trying out a different place to record. So hopefully this all worked really well. Good morning, Samantha. Lovely to see you. So what did I want to say to you before we get into this morning's teaching? There were some things I wanted to share with you. Right, let me just think for a second. Okay, so today's Wednesday, as we all know. And on Friday evening, my incredible friend and author, my incredible friend and an author in her own right, Colleen Stock, she will be speaking. Good morning, Jane. Lovely to see you. She will be speaking at an event on Friday evening, which was going to be in Monte Vista and has now been moved to Tableview. The original invitation is on my Facebook page somewhere. I will find the new invitation with the new details and post it again. But I'm not sure if there are spots open, but the event is organized by Elsabe Basson, and you can contact Elsabe. Her details are on the flyer. You can contact her if you would like to come to that event on Friday evening. So Colleen will be speaking, and I think there's another amazing woman of God speaking, and then I will be doing a bit of prophetic ministry. So if you are mainly there to support my friend, it's her, she is the star of the show for this particular evening, but I will be doing some prophetic ministry. So if you would like to If you live out Tableview, Bloberg way, and you were thinking that Monte Vista is too far to come, it's now moved to your area, so you're welcome to join us there. Oh yes, please, thank you for always reminding me, Jenny. Please like and share the video if it resonates with you. And yeah, it's just amazing what God is doing at the moment in terms of the social media space for Arise. I had the privilege of speaking at, good morning, Annika. I had the privilege of speaking at, those of you who know Carol Campbell, she runs Healing Rooms Africa, and I had the privilege of speaking at a Healing Rooms Africa conference on Monday morning, which was absolutely amazing. Good morning, Arena. And quite a few ladies who follow me on here attended, which was incredible. So I met a whole lot of new people, and that was absolutely awesome. And what else can I tell you quickly while we wait for other people to jump on? So also please, ladies, if you ever feel me laid on your heart, if you ever feel the need to pray for me, will you please pray? For those of you, I think most of you know that I am traveling to America, to South Florida, on the 10th of October. I'm speaking at a women's conference in South Florida in a place called Pompano Beach, I think. I think that's how you pronounce it, on the 14th and the 15th of October. And I am just conscious of the warfare around this trip and around, you know, what I'm going to bring in terms of America. So those of you, I know that lots of you pray for me, and I really appreciate that. But please, intercession would be welcomed. Oh yes, the other thing I just want to mention very quickly is that my husband and I have been blessed. We have these amazing friends, just incredible friends. We are so blessed. And we have been blessed with a week at the Beacon Isle in Plettenberg Bay. And that starts from from Saturday, this Saturday, the 26th of August, till the 4th, I think it is, of September. And so we have been blessed with this week away at the Beacon Isle. And God has been very specific with me. The last time we went away, I continued to do my Facebook Lives in the mornings. And He has said that this week is a time of rest. So next week, there will be no Arise with Sally Goodwin on a Wednesday and a Friday. There will be no Arise with Sally Goodwin next week, as I will be away on a much-needed holiday after all the moving, etc., etc. And I will be back the week after. So don't miss me too much, but you will see me the week after. Last thing before we move into the spiritual side of all of this. As you all know, I do these Facebook Lives. Good morning, Claudia. Hello, my friend. I do these Facebook Lives from my home. And in this home, I have a husband, and I have 2 sons, and I have a cat, and I have 2 dogs. And so they all, you know, tend to need to move around at some point in the morning. And my middle son works in Durbanville, but he has a hybrid. He works kind of a hybrid thing. So he works a couple of days in the office and a couple of days at home. And my lives are actually structured around his days at home. But today he has to go into the office. So if you hear footsteps down the stairs and doors opening and closing and things like that, it is just my son leaving for work. Just the normal part of our morning. Okay, so let's move on. Ladies, we are counting down to the new Hebrew year. Sunset on the 25th of September, we cross over into the new Hebrew year, 5783. Now, I've explained this many times before, but I'll say it again. The Jewish people have 2 new years. They actually have 4 new years, but there's only 2 now that really get celebrated. The civil new year, which is where their calendar crosses over into another year, and the biblical new year. So this is the civil new year, where we cross over from 5782 into 5783, and that is sunset on the 25th of September. So we are in the 40-day countdown to that time. And as I shared with you last time, 40 days is a number. It is often a number that symbolizes trial and persecution. If you think of the 40 days in the wilderness that the Israelites spent, and the 40 days in the desert, 40 years in the wilderness for the Israelites, 40 days in the desert for Jesus. But it is also a number that symbolizes victory on the other side of trials and persecution and tribulation. And I've had so many ladies reach out to me saying to me that they are just feel like they are going through such a tough time. They just feel like the attack is coming from every side. They feel as though they've just been shaken and, and really stirred, and lots of things happening. And I have told all of them that it is this period which is so significant. As we count down to go into the Hebrew New Year, there is just such a significance to this period. And that is why there is a lot going on in the spirit. But there is enormous excitement in the spirit for what is to come. Enormous excitement. But we need to get through the 40 days first. And so many of you have signed up for my daily devotionals, where I said to you that I was going to release a daily devotional each day of the 40 days. And I think the one I released this morning is day 8. So we have, 38 days left. Yes. So I've been releasing a daily devotional every morning, based on the women in the Bible, those that we know well and those that we don't know so well. And so many ladies have signed up. Thank you so much. I'm just so humbled by how many ladies have signed up. But this morning, you won't have had a chance, if you're on my live, you won't have had a chance to read your daily devotional yet, because I went live at 7. So I'm actually going to use the opportunity this morning to just delve a little bit deeper into the daily devotional that I released today. Martha, if you go onto my sallygoodwin.com, sallygoodwin.com, onto my website, there is a little button that says connect, and under the connect button there is a button that says daily devotionals, and you click on that daily devotional button and you put in your name and your surname and your email address, and that will add you to the subscription list for my daily devotionals. So every day for 40 days I'm going to send out an email based on women in the Bible and how we can actually learn from the women who lived and loved and obeyed God in ancient times. And some of those women will be women that you know well, and some of those women will be women you've never heard of before, because, we've glossed over them in the Bible. But the woman that I spoke about this morning was Rebekah. Now, you remember that Rebekah married Isaac. So Abraham and Sarah had Isaac, who was the son of the promise, right? And Isaac then married Rebekah. And Rebekah's story is quite a sad one, I find, because, for those of you who know the story with Esau and Jacob, she was so determined because of the prophetic word that God had spoken over Esau and Jacob when they were in her womb. She was so determined that that prophetic word would be fulfilled that she engaged in a whole act of deception and subterfuge of Isaac in order to make sure that Jacob was the one who inherited the promise the way God had said. And every time I read that story, and I think to myself that this woman's life, she lived an incredible life. And yet her life is overshadowed by this one event. And then it led me to thinking that, isn't that so often us as women? Women, I think it often seems as though we feel, and I think it is part of who we are, that we were born to fix things. We can make things right for people. I remember when my boys were small and they would be disappointed or let down by something, and I would say, Mommy will fix it. Mommy will fix it. Mommy will make it right. And now they're a bit older, and there's so many things that I can't fix in their lives, and it's hard. It's really, really difficult. But as women, we're very capable. We're very, we can do things, we can make things happen, we can sort things out. And so sometimes what happens is we have these prophecies and these promises from the Lord over our lives, but also over the lives of people we love. And when it feels to us like it's taking too long and like nothing's actually happening, and maybe like God has forgotten, or maybe he's gotten distracted, or maybe he can't figure out how to do it, and then we tend to take things into our own hands and try and sort it out for ourselves. And it happened in the Bible many times. Look at Sarah with Isaac. God gave Abraham and Sarah this promise of Isaac, and Sarah, instead of waiting for the promise, because remember, they were really, really old, she didn't think it was possible for them to actually have children. And so because in the natural it looked impossible for her, because the natural circumstances looked as though there was no possible way that God could actually do this, she stepped in and she took charge of the situation, and she tried to make it happen by giving Hagar to Abraham to bear a son. And so, as we know, Hagar bore Ishmael to Abraham, and we know the story of who was descended from Ishmael and who was descended from Isaac when he eventually came, and how that has caused strife and trouble and torment all around the world for ever since that happened, basically. So there are consequences to taking the prophet, to taking the promise and the prophecy into our own hands and trying to make it happen, because we don't believe enough or have faith enough or trust enough in God to actually bring it to pass in his perfect timing. And Rebekah was no different. So Rebekah was amazing. I mean, if you read in Genesis 21, I think it was 24. In Genesis 24, Abraham sends his servant off to go and find a wife for Isaac from amongst his brother's family. So he doesn't want Isaac to marry into the foreigners in the land. He wants him to marry into their own people. So Abraham's brother had daughters, and the servant goes off to find a wife. And if you read Genesis 24, you will see how it happened. You know how the servant trusted God to point him to the right woman, how it was a whole thing about the camels drinking at the water and all of that kind of thing. And there was one woman who stood out in all of that, and where God came through for the servant and showed him that Rebekah was the one. And the servant now goes to Rebekah's family, and he takes all his, the jewelry and everything to prove that, Abraham is wealthy and that Rebekah will be provided for. And he explains who he is, and he explains who Isaac is, and he asks if Rebekah can come with him back to Isaac's land. And if you look at Genesis 24 and you get down to around sort of verse 54, 55, you'll see that Rebekah's brother and mother said, let her stay with us a few days, at least 10 days, and then she may go. Because you must remember, this was a time, there was no social media, there was no technology, they couldn't do a quick Zoom call if they were missing each other. Rebekah was going to another land with a complete stranger to marry a complete stranger, and there was a good chance that they would never see each other again. And so they said, let her stay just a few days, just 10 days, let her stay. And the servant says, please do not hinder and delay me, because God has actually worked wonders here and he's prospered me. Let me go on my way. And then in verse 57, they say, we will call the girl and ask her what is her desire. Now you also need to remember, ladies, in this, and gentlemen, you need to remember that in this, when they say, let us call the girl, these were girls. The girls were married off very young in this time in history. So, she was probably max early teens, 13, 14. Now, just imagine, for those of you ladies who have daughters, packing them off to strangers. I mean, look, they knew Abraham. It was his brother's family, but they hadn't seen him for years and years. They didn't know Isaac. They didn't know anything about, anything. And they were packing her off, this young girl, to go to this person and get married, and with the knowledge that they might never see her again. And so they ask Rebekah, what is her desire? And in verse 58, they say to her, will you go with this man? And she says, I will go. And I just think, that is absolutely incredible. She was just so prepared to go, and she must have had some inkling of it being the plan of God. Well, Isaac's servant explained everything about the testimony, about how he asked God to show him who the right person was, etc., etc. So she had so much faith. She must have had so much faith in that testimony, in that vision, that she was quite prepared to go with this man, with this stranger. And so she goes and she marries Isaac. And so she leaves everything she knows. She leaves her family, her friends, her everything that is, familiar to her. She leaves and she goes with the servant man, this complete stranger, to a strange land to marry a complete stranger. Somebody she has never met, never laid eyes on, never had anything to do with, and she goes to marry this complete stranger. And she gets there, and Isaac immediately, it says that he brought her into a tent and he loved her. In Genesis 24 verse 67, it says, and Isaac brought her into his mother Sarah's tent, and he took Rebekah, and she became his wife, and he loved her. Thus Isaac was comforted after his mother's death. So he loved her. And so they had this amazing relationship, but Rebekah was barren. So she couldn't bear children. She was barren. So what happens now in this instance? So now we move into Genesis chapter 25, and we go down to verse 20. And also just a note, Isaac was 40 when he married Rebekah. There was no ways Rebekah was anywhere near 40. That wouldn't have been, women didn't, they couldn't wait that long to get married then. You got married off as soon as somebody was prepared to marry you, basically, and it was a good match. So she wouldn't have been anywhere near 40, and Isaac was 40 when he married Rebekah, which was quite old. Which also must have given Abraham and Sarah, while they were still alive, a cause for kind of wondering, what this promise was all about, because God had promised them Isaac and he had fulfilled that promise. But then Isaac, got to the age of 40 and he still wasn't married. And so he had no children of his own. And so they must have wondered, there must have been times when they wondered whether God was actually going to fulfill this promise, because most men and women would have been married by that time already, and Isaac had no children yet by the age of 40, and that must have been a cause for concern. Or possibly they'd seen God work such a miracle just in terms of them having Isaac that they never doubted that the promise would come from Isaac the way God had said. So then we go to chapter 25 and we look here at verse 21. So it says, and Isaac prayed much to the Lord for his wife, because she was unable to bear children. And the Lord granted his prayer, and Rebekah his wife became pregnant. 2 children struggled together within her, and she said, if it is so that the Lord has heard our prayer, why am I like this? And she went to inquire of the Lord. So 2 children struggled within her. But, in those days, there were no scans. There was no obstetrician or gynecologist to go and consult for somebody to tell you that you're having twins. There was no way that she could possibly know, what was going on. But she could feel these 2 children struggling within her. So her only recourse is to go and inquire of the Lord. That is the only answer. The only thing that she can do is go and inquire of the Lord and ask him what is actually going on here. And the Lord said to her, so notice this, the Lord spoke directly to her. The Lord spoke directly to Rebekah. So firstly, she's left her home and her family. She's come to marry this man she's never met. She's probably early teens max. He's 40 years old. Then she's barren. He prays much for her. She falls pregnant. Now she has this battle going on inside of her that she doesn't understand, and she goes before the Lord. So she's experienced God. She's experienced his miracle work in power. Now she gets to him. He speaks to her directly, and he says to her, the Lord said to her, the founders of 2 nations are in your womb, and the separation of 2 peoples has begun in your body. The one people shall be stronger than the other, and the elder shall serve the younger. And then it says that when her days to be delivered were fulfilled, behold, there were twins in her womb, and the first came out all over like a hairy garment, and they named him Esau, which means hairy. And then his brother came forth, and his hand grasped Esau's heel, so he was named Jacob, which means supplanter or deceiver. And Isaac was 60 years old when she gave birth to them. Okay, so God gives her this incredible word over these 2 boys. This incredible word that they will both be founders of nations. and that the beginning of a separation of people has begun in her womb with these two boys. And he tells her that the older one will serve the younger one, but they will both be founders of nations. That is a big word to be prophesied directly from the mouth of God over somebody, over this pregnant woman with these two children. That is a big word. So now Rebekah has these twins. She has Jacob and Esau, and they're obviously amazing, and they have different personalities, and their different personalities appeal to their parents in different ways. So Esau appeals more to Isaac because Esau's more an outdoors person, he's a hunter, and etc., and Jacob seems to be, from what the scripture says, the more quieter person, the more homely body. And so Rebekah is closer to Jacob. So Rebekah is closer to Jacob, and Isaac is closer to Esau. And all of the time while the boys are growing up, Rebekah must have this prophetic word in her mind, she's carrying this word in her heart, that both boys will be the founders of nation, but the older one must serve the younger. Now we come to Jewish tradition. And the Jewish tradition, or the Hebraic traditions then, and it's still the case in most Jewish homes today, is that there is a blessing that is imparted on the firstborn. There is a blessing for the firstborn. And in those days, in ancient Hebrew, ancient Israel, the firstborn got a double portion of inheritance. So whatever you have, when you pass away, whatever you leave, the firstborn gets a double portion, and then the remaining children get what is left. So the firstborn was an enormous privilege, and you received a special inheritance, you received a special firstborn blessing, all of that kind of thing. So that was the tradition at the time. And so in Rebekah's mind, based on the Jewish traditions of the time, she's thinking, in order for Esau to have to serve Jacob, because that is what God told her. God told her that the older will serve the younger, and Esau came out first, so he was the older, and then Jacob followed, so he was the younger. In order for that to happen, Jacob needs the firstborn blessing. This is her logic, her woman's logic, right? And you can't pretend that you've never been in this situation before. So her woman's logic tells her that in order for Jacob to be the one who is served by Esau, he needs the firstborn blessing. Because in those, it's an enormous part of Jewish tradition. It's extremely, obviously, if your parents are very wealthy and they have lots of crops and animals and cattle, etc., and land, etc., the firstborn begins his life particularly well off. Doesn't mean that the other children aren't well off, but the firstborn begins his life particularly well off. And obviously that puts you in good standing to be able to actually, go on with your life. And if you're going to be the founder of a nation, the more you have, the easier it will be to found that nation, right? And because Esau is supposed to serve Jacob, Rebekah wants Jacob to have the best possible start in life. Every mother's heart's desire for her child to have the best possible start in life, right? But instead of just standing on the fact, and these things do run through generations. So Sarah started something when she refused to fully believe in the promise of God, and she took matters into her own hands and gave Hagar to Abraham and had Ishmael come forth. And these things do carry on through generations. And Isaac must have known the story of Ishmael and Hagar and everything else that had happened. And he knew that he had this half brother out there somewhere. And now he marries this woman, but that sort of thread of deceit or something has begun in that line, and that lack of faith or lack of belief or whatever. The incredible thing is that there is a stronger thread of redemption that runs through the entire Bible and through our entire lives, particularly now with Jesus. And so that doesn't have to be the story for us. It can stop with us, that generational stuff. But in those days, so it was almost as if a very similar situation to the Abraham and Sarah situation, a very similar situation repeated itself with Isaac and Rebekah. Slightly different circumstances, slightly different situations, slightly different, logistics, but a very similar type of story repeated itself. And so here you have Rebekah now, and now she's worried. So now Isaac is old, okay? And Isaac is, firstly, Jacob obviously loves Rebekah, and he's closer to Rebekah. And they must have been told the prophecy, so he also knows the story, okay? And he also knows the Jewish traditions. And so he does this whole thing with Esau, where he gets Esau to sell his birthright to Jacob for a pot of lentil stew, basically. And in many ways, that was Esau's undoing. So Esau, it seems, was somebody who lived very much for the moment. He wasn't necessarily someone who was particularly far-sighted. He seemed to have been very short-sighted. He lived very much in the moment. And he just casually sold his birthright for a pot of lentil stew because he was starving. And so he gave away his promise. He gave away his promise to satisfy his natural urgings, to satisfy his natural needs, his natural wants, his natural desires. Now, there's nothing wrong with being starving and needing to eat. There's nothing wrong with that. But how often, I wonder, do people born again, lovers of Jesus, how often do they surrender the prophecies and the promises over their life because of natural circumstances, because they don't want to sacrifice their comfort, because they don't want to be in a position where possibly their needs and their wants and their desires aren't met? How often do we sacrifice the long view for the short view? How often do we settle for Ishmael because we can't wait for Isaac, because it feels like it's just taking too long? How often do we surrender, do we lay down, do we sacrifice the ultimate promise and prophecy and blessing and destiny over our life because in the natural, the circumstances are making us nervous and anxious, and we feel like our wants and our needs might not be met? And sometimes, just because it seems to be taking too long and time is marching on, Lord, and we all know that time waits for no man, and so, we're just going to settle. How often do we settle? We settle for an Ishmael because we couldn't wait for Isaac. And so Esau gave up the promise. He gave up his birthright. He gave up his firstborn inheritance. He gave it up to Jacob before Rebekah even stepped in and deceived Isaac. He gave it up. He surrendered it for instant gratification so that his normal, natural needs and desires could be met immediately instead of just waiting or looking for something else or doing. He gave it away. So in many ways, there is a point that where the choices have consequences, and his choice had a consequence. And in many ways, we could say that he deserved what happened, even though I still have always felt sorry for Esau. I just think that, anyway. So this happens in chapter 25. Then we get to chapter 27, and it says that Isaac is old and his eyes are dim and he could not see. And so he called Esau and said to him that Esau must go and make him Isaac's favorite meal, and then he will give Esau his firstborn blessing. So I don't know whether Isaac didn't know that Esau had actually sold his blessing, his firstborn rights to Jacob for a pot of lentil stew. I don't know if Isaac didn't know that, or whether Isaac just didn't, was like, well, that's not something that can be sort of, continued, and he was going to give Esau the firstborn blessing anyway. We don't know. The Bible doesn't tell us that. It just tells us that Isaac knows that he's dying, and he's ready to give the blessing, and he's told Esau that he's going to give it to Esau, and Esau must go and do his thing, make his father his favorite food, and come back, and Isaac will give him the firstborn blessing. Now, Rebekah hears this, and she immediately goes to Jacob and starts to plan this incredibly intricate plan of deception and subterfuge to ensure that Jacob gets the firstborn blessing. Now, this is where I have to say, ladies and gentlemen, who spoke those words over Rebekah? Who spoke those words over Jacob and Esau? God himself. She heard directly from the Lord Directly from the Lord, from the mouth of the Lord, she heard those words. Founders of nations, the elder will serve the younger. She heard them directly from the voice of God. And now the natural circumstances have now led her to believe that God's promise, that God is incapable of fulfilling that promise and that prophecy, because the natural circumstances don't look like it's going to happen. And how many times, ladies and gentlemen, have we heard directly from God about something for our lives? Maybe not the audible voice of the Lord, the way Rebekah heard it, but we have heard from the Lord. He has told us something. He has promised us something. He has said something, and we take that word, and then the moment our natural circumstances do not match up with the word that God has given us, we look for a way to either make it happen, or we settle for an Ishmael, we settle for deceit, we settle for subterfuge, we settle for a second choice, second class, second rate. Because our natural circumstances, with Esau giving up his birthright, and with Rebekah engaging in this whole trick to deceive Isaac, all that happened because the natural circumstances did not match the promise and the prophecy that had been spoken, that they could see. And so they completely bowed their knee to what was happening in the natural, with no thought for the fact that the God of the universe had decreed and declared this to be, and he was going to be quite able to actually bring this to pass. I believe that even if Esau had gotten that firstborn blessing, Jacob would still have become Israel. Israel would still have been who it is today. Even if Esau had gotten his firstborn blessing from Isaac, that would not have stood in the way of what Jacob became and how Israel became to be, because God had already ordained it. It was always going to happen. But the difference was that it was going to happen in God's will, God's perfect will, God's perfect timing. Instead, they did this whole nasty trick over Isaac, and Jacob got what he wanted, but it resulted in him having to leave his home, leave his parents, flee to another land, so that Esau couldn't kill him. It landed up with Jacob being an exile in a foreign country for how long? Because he was so petrified that his brother was going to hunt him down. And yes, there he met his wives, and there, from there came the 12 tribes of Israel. But I firmly believe that would have happened anyway. No, despite Rebekah and Jacob's best efforts, that would have happened anyway, because God had said that would have happened. God had said that was the case. And so it would have happened no matter what, because God ordained it. But no, they weren't prepared to wait to see how God was going to bring it to pass. Rebekah immediately stepped into protective mother mode. She immediately stepped into the space where she was like, okay, you know what, clearly, and I don't know that she actually thought this, I'm just putting words in her mouth here, but clearly God has not got this. He's either forgotten, or he's very far away, or he's busy with something else, and he needs a bit of help. Like, let me just help the Lord out here. Let me just give a bit of a push to this promise, because how else is my Jacob going to be, head over Esau unless he gets this firstborn blessing? And how else is this all actually going to happen? And remember what happens. Esau goes on to be a great nation. Esau goes on to become wealthy and have armies and all of that kind of thing. If you read further on in Genesis where Jacob and Esau met, Esau had gone on, and he'd forgiven Jacob, and he'd moved on, and he'd gone on to do very well for himself. So he didn't suffer. He didn't suffer, from all of this. The Edomites, who descended from Esau, were and still are a thorn in Israel's flesh for the rest of Israel's existence, because of the deception that took place here. And I firmly believe that if they hadn't resorted to that, you would have had two nations. You would have had two separate nations. But there wouldn't have been the enmity between them that there was and is. So Rebekah takes it on herself to help God out. And how often, and look, I'm speaking as a mother here. I can tell you how often I bring my boys before the Lord because they are working on their testimonies. They are not walking with the Lord the way I would love them to be. And I'm like, Lord, this is taking too long, And he says to me, Sally, you need to surrender them to me. And I do. And then a while later, I have to do it again. And again and again and again. Because I keep taking them back. Because I look at them and I'm like, are you doing anything? Is anything happening here? Because I don't see anything, And then God says to me, I love them more than you love them. And I like, I know I need to believe that, but do I believe that really? I don't know. Could God love them more than me? I'm their mother, And I think that we as women, as mothers, as sisters, as spouses, as best friends, as women in the church, as spiritual mothers, I think so many times out of the goodness of our heart, because we want to see God's promise and his prophecy over somebody's life come to pass, and we step in and we try and make it happen. We try and just give it a little push. We like, Lord, we know you're very busy, so you get on with dealing with the big things, like bombs in Israel and things like that, and we'll sort this situation out. We've got this. It's good. It's good. We heard your word. We know what needs to happen. We've got this. It's good. We're good. And God's like, no, this is not going to be done your way. This is going to be done my way, because it is for my glory, and it is because for the greatness of my kingdom that this is going to happen. This is not going to be done your way, Sally, because you might think your way is the right way, but it's not. It's not the perfect way. It's not my way. And so Rebekah had lived this remarkable life. She had borne Esau and Jacob. She had done so much in terms of raising them and loving Isaac and being this incredible family for Jesus. And then in the last kind of moments, she sort of did something that has meant that forever afterwards, in lots of Jewish traditional writings and things like that, forever afterwards, Rebekah is simply known as a woman of deception. Her biggest, the story that's told about her is that she deceived Isaac and ensured that Jacob got the firstborn blessing. And that is like how in many stories, in many things, that is how she's gone down in history. And I think it's unfair, because I think that we can all understand as parents why someone would do that. And we can, not one of us sitting here today can say that we have never tried to help God along, that we have never tried to give him a little shove in the right direction, that we have never tried to step in and just like make something happen because we don't see it happening fast enough. Every single one of us, I'm pretty sure, has at some point in our lives settled for Ishmael instead of waiting for Isaac. Every single one of us have listened to the words, the prophecies, the promises over our lives and the lives of those we love, and have thought, okay, how do we get this to fit in to where we are right now? And how do we make this happen so that this comes to pass? Because God has lots of people, that he's prophesied over, and surely he's not capable of bringing all of those words to pass. We've all done that. I don't think one of you can put your hand up and say you've never done that. We've done that in some way or another. And so my challenge to you in this morning's devotional is to sit with the Lord and ask him where you have thought he has needed a bit of help, where you have tried to preempt him and to bring about the prophecies and the promises over your life or somebody else's life without waiting for him to actually move in his perfect timing and his perfect power. And then, repent. Say sorry. Ask for forgiveness for the places where you know you've stepped in and tried to be God, and then surrender it to him again and say to him, you are God and I am not, and I give this to you yet again, and I surrender it to you yet again, and I trust that you will bring it to pass in your perfect timing, not in my perfect timing. So that was the activation at the end of today's devotional, and I honestly encourage you to sit with the Lord and just deal with some of that stuff. Just get some of that stuff sorted and done and behind you. And then, if you haven't signed up for the devotional yet and you would like to, it is sallygoodwin.com. There is a button that says connect. If you click on the connect button, there are 2 buttons below that, and one of them says daily devotional, and you click on the daily devotional button. And I started 8 days ago, and so what I'm doing is I'm sending a daily devotional for every day of the 40 days between now and the new Jewish New Year. And we will, and we are focusing and looking at women in the Bible and what lessons we can learn from them. And so please be blessed by all of that. I've got such amazing feedback from people who have been blessed by the devotionals, and I'm just very humbled by that. And please, the activation, sit with the Lord. The daily devotionals are sent through at 7 in the morning, so that you have time, whether you do your quiet time in the morning or in the evening, you have time to actually sit with the Lord and do the activations. Do the activations. Sit with the Lord. Get some of that stuff dealt with and put behind you, so that you can cross over into the new Hebrew year, into the new season, without any of this stuff hanging around you or holding you back in any way. And our time is now up. I love you all, and I bless you all, and I bless you with wisdom and understanding, and I bless you with remarkable revelatory insight, that as you read those devotionals, as you listen to this teaching, you will have the clarity and the wisdom to see, for God to highlight to you the things that you need to sort out. That you will have such clarity of mind that even, we all have blind spots, but I decree and declare that even your blind spots will become apparent to you as you sit with the Lord and as you engage with him on this subject, and that you will be able to deal with all of this and move on into the new season without any of this cluttering your life or your heart or your soul any longer. So I just speak wisdom and understanding over you. I speak revelation and clarity over you, and I speak a desire to do what God is calling you to do. And I speak patience and long suffering over you, that you would be prepared to wait for God's perfect timing, for him to come through and fulfill his prophecies and promises, because God's word does not return void. It does not return void, and it will not return void. And if he has said it, he will do it. So I bless you with that. And I will see you on Friday morning at 7 a.m. So I look forward to that. Facebook Live, Friday morning at 7 a.m. Love you all. Bless you all. See you then.